Out of the many genres that exist in television, one of the ones that I find that I don't particularly like to watch is any show that falls under the category of historical fiction. These shows were set in a time long before any of us were ever born. A time so far back that no one is even alive who used to live in that era to tell us about it and what it was like. And that's where fiction comes in. Writers have taken to their pages to try and make guesses or approximations of what may have occurred during those eras based on what has been passed down through the ages, to create stories that, as far as they can tell, are fairly realistic. Most of the time, however, to me, it never feels truly real. There's always something that's missing. The best type of historical fiction, at least to me, are the ones where people take those settings from a long time ago, but make it very obvious that this new retelling of this setting is not trying to be realistic. Like, how about a story containing a British Air Force made entirely of dragons that fight against Napoleon? That's the kind of shit I'm into. Now, you don't have to go to those extremes necessarily, and the show that we're going to be looking at today doesn't go that far. However, today we are going to be looking at an anime set in an alternate version and a more colorful version of Japan's Edo period, full of graffiti, breakdancing, beatboxing, and badass samurai. Ladies, gentlemen, and others, my name is Arcada, and welcome to Glass Reflection. Today, Samurai Shampoo. Let's jam. As mentioned before, the story of Samurai Champloo takes place in an alternate universe version of Japan's Edo period, and it follows our main characters Mugen, Jin, and Fu, who, after getting thrown together as unlikely companions after the show's first episode, traverse the land of Japan in search of a samurai that smells of sunflowers, and then at the end of the show, they find him. Whoop-de shit. You may think that I have spoiled you right there on the ending, but relax with my assurances that I have not. Because let me be honest, it takes them 26 episodes to even get to the sunflower samurai. And those 26 episodes are filled with so much extra stuff and a bunch of meandering that the focus of the plot really loses its way for a large chunk of this series. Champloo was directed by Shinichiro Watanabe, director of the highly acclaimed Cowboy Bebop. Watanabe has this thing with his works where he likes to create these really good overall plot lines, but then spread them out with over-the-top standalone episodes that, while entertaining, do nothing to progress whatever overall plot there happens to be. In Champloo's case specifically, this is much more apparent than it was in Bebop's case, though it doesn't help that many of the show's earlier episodes all have the same story structure. Our characters get split up, proceed with their own completely unrelated plot lines for the entirety of the episode, before somehow, with the help of the god of coincidences, having their plot lines converge on each other, with everything being resolved by both Mugen and Jin doing some completely badass samurai shit before they all run off into the sunset, looking for the sunflower samurai, complaining that they don't have anything to eat because they are piss broke. On the whole of it, the lack of development on the show's quote-unquote main plot was highly apparent. But the standalone episodes attempted to make up for it by creating some really hilarious scenes to spice things up.
Alrighty, let's get down to business here.
Hey! Look, there's a naked woman over there!
Huh?
The problem with the characters of Champloo is that that's exactly what they are. Just characters. There are many times throughout the course of the show that you would find it hard to believe for these characters to be actual people, and this leads to a subtle disconnect that I was disappointed with. Granted, they are not as stereotypical as your average harem or visual novel adaptation, but the stereotypes that these characters do represent are constantly reinforced and barely developed over the course of the series. In our trio of characters, we have Mugen, the breakdancing samurai who takes no shit from no one. Jin, a more traditional samurai ronin who doesn't talk much and prefers to keep his life to himself. And lastly, there's Fu. Fu doesn't really have a purpose. Seriously, she doesn't. In the span of the entirety of the show, aside from whining, getting kidnapped, and eating a share of everybody's food, she serves two purposes. One, to make sure that everybody makes it to see the Sunflower Samurai, which is flimsy considering how I mentioned before that the whole plot there is barely existent to begin with. And two, to give a reason for Mugen and Jin not to kill each other, which, to be honest, I'm surprised that all it took was this girl with an impossible mission to convince them not to fight to the death. Like, I would have figured they just try to kill each other anyway, but what can you do? The plot must go on! Now here's where I can spout out some amazing praise. The animation production was done by Studio Manglobe, famous for shows like Ergo Proxy and Deadman Wonderland. And like with those shows, the animation for Samurai Champloo can be beautiful. And I personally had the pleasure of watching the show in full 1080p, which I must say was well worth it. As good as the action scenes were back in the day with like Bebop, Champloo has capitalized on what made those good and excelled at them really well. The whole thing just has this sense of style that is rarely seen in a lot of shows today. The little downsides that exist are that most of the backgrounds, while surprisingly detailed at times, can be rather dull. And while most of the action scenes are top-notch, there are times when the quality drops very drastically, almost to an irritating, cringeworthy level. Though to be fair, those moments were few and far between, and when it wants to look good, it does. There's one major thing to mention about the show's soundtrack, apart from the fact that the music was composed by a variety of hip-hop groups from Japan who haven't really done any anime work before or since. And that is the fact that it's hip-hop music, which I'm not gonna lie, is one of those genres of music I'm not particularly a fan of.
Yo! On the peaks in the snow, he's a spooky mofo. Everything's gone a loony cause the mountain's haunted by Yoshitsune. Oh, it's gotta be the ghost!
Yoshitsune.
Yeah, boy.
Who's that? Who do they mean?
He's fat, he's fly, he's tall as a sky. Always grabs his rocks when the bitches walk by. Yo!
However, for the most part, in this show, I have no problem with it, because it does have this weird ability to blend in with the show's style rather well, to make it less obvious. Unless someone actually started to try and add lyrics to the music, which makes it a lot more obvious, and then I just have to close my eyes, shake my head, and attempt to ignore it. Same thing goes for the opening, really. As stylized and fitting as it is for the show, I didn't find anything appealing with it personally, but that's just my own musical tastes kicking in. I'm sure if you're more tolerant of this genre, then you'll enjoy it just fine. I will say though that the show's ending, surprisingly enough, is one of the more entertaining endings that I have watched as of late, with a song that has been in and out of my head countless times since I have started watching the show. I normally don't like a lot of endings, but this just happens to be one of the few exceptions in which I do, which is nice. The show's English dub had a lot to live up to, because if you've noticed my constant Bebop comparisons, that's something that also would come into play here. And I'm happy to say that it succeeded with a very well-rounded, well-produced, and highly entertaining dub. The main actors, Steve Blum, Kirk Thornton, and Kari Wahlgren, did an amazing job, doing performances that made the characters that they were playing a hell of a lot more interesting than they could have been, and also making Champloo one of those dubs that I would say actually surpasses the original Japanese dub. Though I'm quite sure there are many people out there that would lynch me for making such a statement. The main impression I got from Samurai Champloo is that while Watanabe has insisted that he's done with Bebop, that Bebop is over, that there's still this little part of him that just can't let go. And you can see many similarities between these two works, which then leads to comparisons, and that really does not help Champloo's case, considering the overwhelming popularity of Bebop. What Champloo is an entertaining look at an alternate version of Japan. And if you're looking for a visually appealing samurai show to watch, this should be the first on your list. It has its failings, but what doesn't? And even though from a technical aspect, and hell, even from a numerical aspect, but I'll get to that in a minute, the show might only seem slightly above average and not really worth your time, it makes up for it by being, well, immensely cool and badass. When the show wants to amaze you, it hits it out of the park. Unfortunately though, it's just unable to keep up that momentum and level of quality the entire run of the show. With all that in mind, I have meticulously calculated values for the categories of story, characters, animation, sound, and my own personal enjoyment, which after going on a mission to nowhere and fighting zombies, meeting graffiti artists, and sneaking through a checkpoint because everyone within a 12-kilometer radius was stoned to death, has me awarding Samurai Champloo with a numerical rating of 6.92 out of 10. However, I also give the show a personal recommendation to buy it. While it does have flaws, the rule of cool dominates this show, and it is enjoyable enough for me to sit here and tell you to buy it regardless of its only slightly above average score. Though heck, in the past there have been people who consider shows I've given an 8.9 to be worthless, but their own personal scoring systems are too screwed in the head for me to cater to them. Samurai Shampoo is available on DVD and Blu-ray in North America by Funimation Entertainment, who also has the show available for legal streaming over on their website for completely free in subtitles, but for the dub beyond episode 4, you need to be a member of their subscription service in order to view it. The show has also been licensed by these wonderful countries listed on screen, and you can pick up the show there if you happen to know where to look. For alternate anime recommendations, I point you towards the heavily aforementioned Watanabe masterpiece Cowboy Bebop, which you should have watched already, and if you have, also make sure to check out the other highly praised samurai anime, Samurai X Trust and Betrayal, the prequel to the Rurouni Kenshin series. And between the two, hopefully you will find something to your liking. And with that, I leave you. Until next time, ladies, gentlemen, and others, stay frosty.